Now, the Republicans should give up fighting Obamacare. An FTA with China will be mainly symbolic, and the mining boom isn't over. Those are just some of the thoughts of former Prime Minister John Howard, who addressed the CEO Magazine Executive Conference in Hamilton Island a little earlier today. He spoke exclusively with Sky News business reporter Nigel Freitas at the conference.
Fall on both sides. The Republicans have made a mistake in trying to attach Obamacare to their willingness to fund the future operations of the government. Whether they like it or not, Obamacare seems to be the law of the country. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court, and it's been a useless exercise still fighting that battle. Now, I understand they don't like it, but sometimes in politics you've got to admit defeat on a particular issue and move on to something else. So that's the first comment. The other comment I make is that President Obama seems strangely passive. Now, I know he feels strongly about Obamacare and he's not going to shift on that, and I can understand and sympathise with that. On the other hand, though, in a situation like this, I do think he should be actively engaging with everybody a little more than he is to bring about a change, a resolution. I suspect that if Bill Clinton had still been in the White House, and I'm speaking about a Democrat White House, then he probably would have adopted a slightly more active approach, because after all, President Obama is in his second and last term and he's got nothing to lose. So they're my observations.
And you're confident that this situation can be resolved before the October 17th debt ceiling deadline?
I suspect it will. I just can't imagine that the slow-moving apparatus of the American government would allow a situation to get to the point where the debt ceiling wasn't lifted and then you had to start making choices about what was being repaid and the like. I just can't imagine that's going to happen, but I could be wrong. And whilst people are operating on the assumption that it won't happen, we could all be wrong, but I hope we're not.
Let's turn to China now, and Tony Abbott has decided that he wants to fast-track a free trade agreement with that country within 12 months. Is that a move that you would support?
Oh, look, having a free trade agreement with China is a first-class idea. It's a good idea, but let's keep everything in perspective. Whether or not we have a free trade agreement with China doesn't alter the fact that China is our best customer. And it's very important that we don't see the success or failure of trade with China determined by whether or not we have a free trade agreement. For heaven's sake, we've more than quadrupled our trade with China in the last 10 years. The Chinese demand for our resources has played a major part in helping us avoid the global financial crisis. So whether or not we have a free trade agreement is not going to determine whether China is a good customer. It will be a welcome add-on, and that's why when I was Prime Minister we started the negotiations.
But given the mining boom that you mentioned is in fact slowing down, how do you see our economy now placed?
I think the mining boom is moderating. One of the mistakes the former government made was to say the mining boom was over. It wasn't over, it's not over, and it's never going to be entirely over, because we have this enormous vein of resources in this country. It's just very important we understand that it is probably moderating, but we still have very good terms of trade, and the dollar is lower than it was, and that's helping our export industries. So I think we're going to keep that in mind to start with. The mining boom is moderating, it's not collapsing. Do I think the Australian economy has challenges? Yes, I think we are running on empty, so to speak. We do face productivity challenges. We are less competitive. Our costs are higher. And those are things that I imagine the new government will be grappling with, and so it should, because they're quite major challenges. And we can't assume that we can continue to enjoy the sort of success we've had for a long time without finding ways of reclaiming our competitiveness.
Before the 2004 election, you made a comment that should you lose based on WorkChoices, it would take off workplace reform from the agenda for at least a generation. Are you disappointed that Tony Abbott isn't pursuing a more comprehensive workplace reform agenda, given the need to boost productivity?
I made something like that comment before the 2007 election, not the 2004 one. I understand why the then opposition adopted the attitude it did towards industrial relations when it went into opposition in 2007. I think the former government has made a mistake re-regulating the labour market. I thought our industrial relations policy, that is the industrial relations policy of the Howard government, were good for the country. After all, under our system, real wages rose strongly, unemployment fell sharply, and strikes fell just as sharply. So there must have been something good about those industrial relations reforms. There are a number of reforms that the Abbott government has in mind. For example, giving bigger back to the Building and Construction Authority, and that's important for the commercial construction industry, particularly in Western Australia and Victoria. And also there is within the Coalition's policy taken to the last election, there is an emphasis on using the flexibility that is available within the existing system. So
it's nowhere near WorkChoices.
Well, WorkChoices has been wrongly used as a description of all of the IR reforms we undertook in 11 years. There was one big mistake in WorkChoices, and that was getting rid of the no disadvantage test, but there are a lot of other things that the former government rolled back, including, of course, the abolition of individual contracts. But the important thing is that the new government has a mandate to do certain things, and quite correctly the new Prime Minister wants to stick to what he said he'd do when he was elected, and that will bring great confidence to the Australian business community.
We're going to head to a quick break. On the other side.